it's always a pleasure to welcome him to the stage, and I'm sure he will get us through the day, even though we are not physically together. Thanks, and welcome, Paul.
Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christian. Gosh, he managed to do it without notes. I have to use notes, so that's what it's like when you follow a professional. They make games. They make very good games, from what I see, from what I know. Welcome, everybody. Lovely to see you. I can see you. Many of you have not put that little card over your web camera, so I can see you in your pajamas right now. That sounds wrong, doesn't it? But anyway, welcome from the City of Smiles. Well, here we are in Aarhus. We miss you. We totally miss you because we're in this bunker, a bunker that I think some of you have been in before. The downside is that we don't get to see you. It's much easier for me to fill when there are 150 people in the room. The good side, the flip side, is there's no queues to the toilet, so that's there's always a silver lining somewhere in there. What are we going to be doing today? Oh, by the way, did you know there are 150 of you out there, supposedly, sitting out there watching this? And there's a chat function, so make sure you put your name in. Put your name and your company name. Why not? Because we want to know who you are so that we can hold you accountable to all those lovely questions and the comments that you're going to be making. So there's a thing down the right-hand side. We can come on to that in a little bit. So welcome. The focus today, as Christian just said, is going to be very much about tweens and teens. And we're going to be covering such amazing topics as media consumption, digital spending habits, and creating universes. So I would think there's something really quite intoxicating about these years that kind of bridge between childhood and adulthood. As adults, we look back to it, we fear it, we resent it, we yearn for it again and again. We fill it with our prejudices, that's a hard word to say. We try to control it, and we also extract from it all those wonderful memories. I certainly do. We profit from it, and maybe, just maybe, we can learn from it. And I think that's something that's going to be very poignant today about what are our learnings, what are our takeaways from hearing from the various different speakers. Now, when I was preparing for today, I went through the internet, and I was trying to find a particular documentary, 2014 documentary aptly called Teenage, by the American filmmaker Matt Wolf. It's based on a book by the English writer, broadcaster and media journalist John Savage, who I would encourage you to look up. I failed miserably to be able to watch this documentary online. I went to all the channels, all the correct one, Amazon and Netflix and iTunes. Couldn't find it anywhere. I reckon had I been a teenager, I would have probably found it somewhere. But it's a very poignant piece, and I want to take some quotes from it because it gets to the nub, the heart of, I think, some of the maybe quite lofty and quite academic thoughts around teenageness. But here we go. I just made that word up, teenageness. Internet Movie Database says of it, it says, teenagers did not always exist. In this living collage of a rare archival material, film portraits and voices lifted from the early 20th century diary entries, a struggle erupts between adults and adolescents to define a new idea of youth. So, here we are today, trying to define something that possibly, at its core, is about how it continually reinvents its own way to define itself. I'm going to take my glasses off, much easier to read. I did, however, manage to find a great conversation between said filmmaker and writer, and here's a quote by Mr. Savage himself. Are you ready for this one? If you're pessimistic, you think that young people are all listless, internet-addicted junk food addicts. And if you're optimistic, you think, as I believe, that young people are hardwired to find creative solutions to the problem faced by the world today. Well, let that one sink in while I have a sip of water. So, the question is, do I leave it to my 15-year-old son to save the planet, even though he'd actually probably struggled to change a plug? Or do we risk mystification, overestimating a group simply because we as adults, we've struggled to grasp them? Or do we risk untapping this rich seam of talent because we can claim to have travelled through this terrain once before? And I think that goes to the heart of what I would encourage you to do throughout today, or throughout the morning at least. We're not here this afternoon. If you are, well, you'll be on your own. But throughout the morning, we are going to be hearing a number of speakers who I hope you can put on your critical glasses and ask that question. How are we approaching the way by which we try to understand this group? So a little meta thinking for you, but the majority of you Danes, you've all studied a bit of philosophy, so you'll be able to cope with it. So, my planet-saving, non-plug changing son once told me a great joke. Are you ready for this? Okay, so a man says to his son, he says, "Son, how old are you?" Your son says, "I'm 14. Dad says, "When I was your age, I was 15. I can't hear you laughing, but I know that you are. I like that joke because I think it points in a way to, they're laughing here, which is lucky. I'm not on my own, by the way. Christian's still here. We've got some technical crew as well. They're laughing. I think it really points in a way to the way in which we look back and we romanticize and we also condition our ways of thinking purely on the basis that we were once there and we have memories of that. So in some ways it's always really good, I think, as practitioners, in order to reawaken the way in which we look at a particular target group so that we don't come with all our confirmational bias and we don't just simply put it into a category that I was once there and therefore I know. I know that because I worked within children's department for 8 of my 12 years at the BBC, and I certainly know that I didn't do enough time back then looking into the target group and really trying to understand it from their perspective rather than from my old lofty perspective. So, question is, what are you lovely audience going to be doing here today? Well, are you going to be decoding their distinctive status, or are you going to puncture the myth? And while, as I said, you might be sitting there in your pajamas, you need to put your critical hats on. So make sure you use the chat. There's a chat function on the side of Vimeo, I believe, right-hand side. This lovely group here, you can't see them, I can, will be feeding me via modern technology, my phone. I will be getting text messages throughout the morning of stuff that you are asking. So if you've got any pertinent questions that you want to throw at any of our 4 speakers today, please write it into the chat. These guys will send it to me, and by the power of wizardry, it will come up, I hope. It will also allow me to fill in the cracks. I'm going to take you to a few words that were taken from the trailer of the documentary that I mentioned earlier. Ready for this? A lot of people try to shape the future, but it's the young ones who live in it. Those who get the youth get the future. It's not bad, though, is it? A lot of people try to shape the future, but it's the young ones who live in it. Those who get the youth get the future. So, for those of you out there in TV land who want to get the youth, we've got 4 very eloquent speakers and very insightful speakers for you here today. Turning page. As Christian mentioned, we will be going over to Universal Music to meet up with Charlotte Brøndum Madsen to discover a campaign that got more views than there are Danes. Tina Kjærgaard Knudsen, who used to work for Funday Factory, but now works for Arla, which is kind of funny because her middle name sounds like some special made butter, will take us for a dive into some hot chocolate milk that gained a personality. And Jen Bolton will reveal the secrets of being a player whisperer. And I can tell you a secret about Jen Bolton, is that she lives only 10 miles from my birth town of Dorking back in the UK. But that has got absolutely nothing to do with today. What has got to do with today is the fact that we are going to kick off with an old favourite, okay? Coming up soon is someone who, I think this is her 3rd time to Digital Kids today. We bring her back not because she got it wrong last time, but because she got it so right last time. So, you would have thought that after all these years, I would be able to pronounce her surname by now. Here to give us a deep dive into this wonderful space between childhood and adulthood is Jelena Stocic. She is Strategy Director. I really shouldn't have written the word Strategy Director after the word Stocic. She is Strategy Director at the UK-based award-winning insight, strategy and creative agency Kids Industries.